critical thinking in your classroom?
Critical thinking in a drama classroom is really important because it helps kids scaffold their learning. And when we have a simple concept that's not followed up by a more difficult one, it diminishes the quality of what that child is going to learn. One of the big challenges for critical thinking is connecting the cognitive domain to the affective domain, so that there is a sense that one is not working with one half of the brain only when one is doing critical thinking, that it's in fact part of a whole, and that the student is working with all of their brain in order to have a successful outcome in their education.
Critical thinking involves habits of mind that students use in order to solve problems, evaluate media. It involves using intellectual tools like judging, making judgments, problem solving, decoding puzzles, that sort of thing. And they can use that in their everyday lives to make good choices in their life. Just structuring your questions that challenge kids to deconstruct their thinking. It's giving them a framework to work with. I think it's very important because you are trying to teach them, again, habits of mind. And you can't assume that they have the background knowledge as well to make decisions. So you really have to structure your lessons so that you can help, again, kids frame and work through questions. In my classroom, what I do is we talk about a task. If I'm going to pose a critical challenge question for them to work through, we would talk about the task. I would talk about the background information, and we would talk about requirements of the task. And then we would discuss together what the success criteria is for that particular task, let's say, and we would come up with the success criteria together. Success criteria is something that I'm assessing when I'm looking at their final product, let's say. And that's how that's the framework I use when I'm challenging my kids in the classroom.
Probably critical thinking will be mostly applied to the problem-solving process, because students will have to ask themselves and interpret a problem and then solve it and reflect and think if it is reasonable or not reasonable. But the other place that I would see critical thinking is in the strand on data management, which can be tied to social studies or healthy and all that stuff, where students could do the mathematics, collect the data, represent it, but also ask questions about social, so relating to social or cultural, our society. For example, why this is happening, why many kids are dying of this and what is going to do that and what not. I also see social justice in there, and mathematics, where they can also use critically analyze data in data management and talk about the consequences of what they see there.
In science, I teach the science methods courses, so it's critical thinking actually fits in very well in that, because a lot of my strategies that I use, for example, the experimentation where we do predict, explain, so critical thinking for me is asking questions. So students should be able to ask and also answer questions in different ways and see different possibilities for problem solving. I do what is called technological problem solving in my class. So in that way, students actually have to design some kind of, say, a contraption. So they basically have to think about strategies and give them a scenario of a problem, and they have to think about a strategy to solve that. And so they actually do some designing, where they create the actual product, they redesign it, they see if it works. They actually design a boat or something to see if it works. There's other models of cars that they design. So I think it's basically getting them to actually think for themselves, to come up with strategies, to come up with alternatives to solutions, to come about, especially in science, we infer. So you want them to basically look for evidence to back up their claims that they make. So a lot of it is looking for evidence to back up your claims. So that's what we do. I mean, I don't do critical thinking as a topic that I teach per se, but it's integrated in everything that I teach to my students because it's basically what they do and how they think and learn in the classroom.
Critical thinking is an imperative skill that we have to teach our children because they need to be critical thinkers when they enter the world of work in the real world. If they simply regurgitate what they hear from other people, they're mindless drones. We need them to be the constructors of their own knowledge so that they can handle the problems that society will present to them. Albert Einstein once commented that we cannot solve the problems of today with the thinking that created them. But if we're not teaching creative, critical thinking skills, we're not preparing our children to meet the demands that the future will hold for them. One of the challenges you can face when you have critical thinking activities or activities in which critical thinking skills are utilized is that sometimes the beliefs and values of the children might contradict those of yourself, and therefore you have to use your thinking skills to understand their perspective. These types of skills work best in a community of inquiry when everyone feels accepted and welcome, and therefore can discuss and analyze materials from multiple perspectives using Gardner's multiple intelligences approach, and where children feel comfortable and that the authority of the teacher is not absolute. Perhaps the works of William Dahl summarize it best when he says that teachers and students have to enter into a partnership in which they understand that divergent thinking and multiple perspectives is the best way to analyze and get to the real root of problems that we face in society. Therefore, if we have critical thinking skills embedded into our programs and we teach our children to think for themselves, we're preparing them to handle the challenges they will face in the future.
Awesome.